Today we're actually learning another exponent rule. So this is kind of an extension of the rules that you've already learned. But this one is going to take a little bit longer to kind of get used to. And so that's why it's a separate day. But we're going to be learning about what to do with what are called rational exponents. Okay, so a rational exponent, anytime you see the word rational, you need to think fraction. Okay, because it's kind of another word for fraction. So a rational exponent will be when you have a base or a number to an exponent that is a fraction. And so we're going to learn two different ways to write it, and then we're going to learn how to solve problems and how to simplify problems with that. Okay, so whenever you have a base to an exponent that's a fraction, one way that you could write it is the top number will become the exponent. It's still going to be the exponent. The bottom number will become a root, okay? And so whenever you're doing these problems, and I'll write it to the side here, you need to think the top number is the power, so we'll put power, or it's another name for exponent. So I'll write that down. And then the bottom number, so the denominator, will be your root, okay? So when you rewrite it, you need to think power over the root, and that'll tell you where to put things. So what do I mean by that? Well, the bottom number I told you was going to be the root. So a root, remember, looks like that. And so that bottom number is actually going to come over and be in the little check mark part of your root. Okay, so you would say that this is the nth root. Okay, and then that top number, remember I said that was your power, so that's going to be your exponent. So it's going to come down. The base will still be underneath the root, and it's going to come down and become the exponent of that base. Okay, so power over root. The m became the power, and then the n was in the little root. Okay, the other way that this can be written, and it'll actually mean the same exact thing, is you're going to take the root part and the a, and you leave them kind of the way they are, but that m, the power, can actually be written outside of all of that. Okay, so it could either be written like this or like this. Okay, so what do you do to simplify problems? Well, just an example that you could have with this is you could have 16 to the 1/4 power. So notice you have a base and then you have a fraction as an exponent. So whenever you have a rational exponent, a fraction that's an exponent, you need to think the top number, remember, is your power. The bottom number is your root. Okay, so if you were to rewrite it in this form, remember that 16, just like the a did, it's going to go underneath the root, and the bottom number becomes your root. So it comes over and kind of slides in the little check mark thing. And then the 16 will now be to that power. Okay, and so when you simplify this, because it will simplify because it's a number, you do this part first. So 16 to the first would just be 16. And then you take the 4th root of 16. Now, if you have a calculator, you're more than welcome to type this in your calculator. But if not, you can think through and say to yourself, okay, 4th root means that you're trying to find what number times itself 4 times will give you 16. Well, if you kind of think through it, 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 gives you 16. So the 4th root of 16 would be 2, okay? So that's how you simplify. Okay, let's do another example. So let's say that we have 8 to the 4/3 power, all right? So I've kind of talked to you about how to rewrite it, but some people need things to memorize things with, and so I have this silly little story that I have come up with in my head that helps me remember it. I think of the fractions as like people, and I think about, okay, the bottom number is holding the top number up, And so the bottom number gets tired after a while of holding him up. So he runs away to be cradled. So like if you're thinking about this one, the 4 ran away to be cradled in the arms of the root, while the 1, because it didn't have anybody to hold on to him anymore, dropped down underneath the radical. And so that's just a silly little story that I came up with that helps me. And so you're more than welcome to use that same story if you need to, okay? But whenever we're doing this, the bottom number, remember, always goes in the root. So it'd be the 3rd root of 8 to the 4th power, okay? Power over the root, all right? And then just like before, you simplify. This one's a little bit harder to simplify, but this is actually the reason why I talked about this other way of writing it. Because if you take this and you rewrite it this way, with taking the 4 outside of the parentheses, so the cube root of 8 stays inside, but then that 4 comes outside, it actually makes the problem a whole lot easier, because now you do the cube root of 8 first, since it's inside the parentheses. So what number times itself 3 times gives me 8? That would be 2. So it'd be 2, that's what you get for this part, and then it'd be 2 to the 4th. And we actually kind of did that problem when we were thinking through this. 2 times itself 4 times. That would be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. That would be 16. So there's that. So other types of problems that you may see with this, besides just the simplifying problems, is they may start throwing variables at you. So let me erase real quick. So if they start throwing variables at you, so let me grab my notes so I can remember this example. They might just tell you to rewrite it in radical form, okay? So the directions may say something like this: rewrite in radical form. So if they do that, they'll give you something maybe like this. Okay, so if they tell you to rewrite that in radical form, you do the exact same thing you did here. So power over root. So the root would be the square root. So we don't normally put the square root, so because it's a given whenever it's written just like that. So if you wanted to erase the 2 when it's a square root, you can. And then remember the x goes underneath, and then the power was 3. So power over root. Okay, so remember that's one way to write it. The other way that it could be written is you could take that 3 and put it on the outside. That's actually the same thing, okay? So then another problem that they could give you is they could actually ask you to go the other way with it. So they could say, rewrite it in exponential form. Okay, so let me find my example here. They'll have it in radical form. So let's say that they have the 5th root of y squared. Okay, so if they have the 5th root of y squared and you have to put it in exponential form, that's actually working backwards. So you have to remember about that fraction. It's the power over the root. Okay, so think about, go ahead and write your base. Think about which one's the power and which one's the root. That's the exponent, so that's the power. That's the number that goes on top. And then the root goes on the bottom. So if I kind of put that together, power 2 over root. And then there is my exponential form. Okay, the last type of problem that they'll give you is they might start asking you to combine some of your exponent rules. So we'll do one more where they kind of ask you to combine some stuff. So a lot of times the directions here will be just to simplify it. So with that, let's say that they give you this problem right here, 16x to the 4th, and then all of that is to the 1/2 power. So this is going to combine a couple things for us. So first of all, if you think back to what we did the other day, you have a bunch of stuff on the inside to a power. So if you think about the PMS that we talked about, power to a power was the first thing you had to do. So you have to take this to those powers. So remember, you got a hidden power right there, a hidden exponent. So make sure you put that in there. And then you multiply power to a power. Okay, so when I do that, the parentheses will go away. So it'd be 16 to the 1 times 1/2 is 1/2. And then x to the 4 times 1/2 would be, well, 4 times 1 is 4. And then you leave the denominator the way it is because there's nothing on top, on the bottom of the 4. Okay, it's technically a 4/1. Okay, so from there, you have to see if any of this will simplify. Okay, we talked about this when it's a number that has a fractional exponent. You can go to the side and think about that. So if we rewrote that, power over root, it would be a square root of 16 to the first. Well, 16 to the first is just 16, so it'd be the square root of 16. And then the square root of 16 would end up being 4. So that ends up just being 4. And then the x, that's to the 4/2 power. So 4/2 reduces. 4 divided by 2 is just 2. And then nothing else will simplify. And so there is your answer, 4x squared. So all of that mess became 4x squared. So feel free to ask questions in the group chat. You can email me questions if you have questions, but good luck with the homework.